What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Welcome to a Friday show, gang. Hope everybody's doing well out there. Nice little 6-game Friday on both sites. Not a bad slate to be dealing with. A lot of trade fallout across this one. A lot of players who will not yet be with their new teams. A couple guys whose status we're still up in the air about. You can see one of them up toward the top of the board. But yeah, I'm kind of with Doug. I like the looks of this slate. It's an interesting one. Not a crazy robust slate, but some really interesting spots. Some value-created spots. Couple potential just absolute wipeout games as far as blowouts, as far as the Vegas lines. Should be a fun one. Hopefully you guys did well last night. I only had a few lineups in, but I put a few of them into the money. Basically a break-even type night. What do we have? Biggie out of LeBron. Forget what else happened. Didn't end up doing a show yesterday. Just got caught up in the trade deadline, trying to stay on top of things, and just kind of lost track of the time, to be quite honest. And before I looked up, it was like 3:30, and I wasn't where I needed to be yet as far as NHL projections. So that one was just totally on me. I can't blame that on the NBA. But we are playing with fire a little bit with a 4:30 start today. We'll see if anything breaks in the next couple of minutes. I hate kicking these off in this window because this is just a big-time spot for things to change. And then we end up talking about a board that's different than what we're looking at. No new news as of the last couple minutes. That 4:30 is imminent, though. It probably hasn't landed yet. We'll see what we get there. But right now, we do have a few guys who are still questionable, as I was saying, for trade processing purposes. A couple of them I have in, a couple of them I have out. Just kind of leaning on what the reporting is going to look like, but it could swing. The one to mention up at the top of the board there, the way it's sorted, though, Dalton Connect, not on the DraftKings slate. Near as I can tell, DraftKings didn't update the Hornets for reasons. Like Mark Williams, I think, is still listed on the Hornets. But Connect not available there. Comes up as a mid-board option on FanDuel. I've got him in 28 minutes. He's only a .73 player. We got him 17%, like level with the field. I think he's fine. If he plays, he probably will see minutes 24 to 28 would probably be my range, so maybe that's on the upper end of it. But at worst, I think he's playable on FanDuel. I hope he does, Doug. Yeah, Doug mentions Giannis is questionable. Right now, I'm going with I hope he does because he looks absolutely tremendous at the top of the board. We got 60% of Giannis on FanDuel. We got 60% of Giannis on DraftKings. We got an absolute ton of Dame Lillard as well on the other side of that one. So, yeah, I'm hoping they're there. But Giannis currently questionable. Dame's probable. Let me go through the Vegas lines as everybody comes in the door. Welcome, everybody. I know Cujo's here. Happy Friday to you too, buddy. Anthony Taylor. We got Doug already said hi to. OMG Lols. What's going on, OMG? Good evening. San Antonio at Charlotte. San Antonio favored by 10.5 against the Hornets. It's a mix. We might have a 75% of LaMelo for this one. He's currently questionable. We've got Bridges, then we've got some backups, some guys traded away, some mediocre veterans, and so on and so forth on the Charlotte side of that one. San Antonio looking more intact, kind of up at the top side. We've already had De'Aaron Fox debut, so we kind of know what that's going to look like. Definitely favoring some Spurs, but some Hornets going to be creeping through for value plays. The Cavs at the Wizards. The Cavs are 17.5-point favorites on the road in Washington. 239-point total. That was... Actually, no, it was the other game. It was the Bucks and the Hawks that's in the 240s. So this one and that Bucks game we were just referring to with Giannis and Dame, just absolute major targets. Cavs going up against the Wizards. There's some value emerging from the Cavs because they made a couple swaps. So like no more Karis LeVert. We have Ty Jerome should be standing tall somewhere on this board. There he is. A little bit further down than I expected, actually. This is the first time I'm seeing these sim results all laid out. We're level with the field on Jerome. But across the board, he's just coming up 16%. I would have expected to see him a little bit higher. But anyway, some emergent value and then just some top-end guys with the starting unit from the Cleveland side. And then the Washington side's giving us a little bit because we've got like Rashawn Holmes value. He's questionable himself. So that one could get eradicated. Hopefully they don't mess around with the Sarr news like they did the other day. If you weren't here for that one, Sarr was out all day. Holmes was a value pick of the day, like one of the smash value spots of the day among the bigs. And then at I want to say it was the 6 o'clock window, or maybe it was the 5 o'clock window for the injury reports, 5:30 to 6:30. They said, oh, Sarr's questionable now. And then right before lock, they switched it back. It's just nonsense. But right now, assuming 26-ish minutes, 24 to 26, 27 would probably be the range. I think he looks pretty good. 46 on FanDuel, we only got him a little bit. 35 on DraftKings, we got him a ton. So definitely a lot of spots coming out of Cleveland and Washington in the 239-point total. Miami and Brooklyn, the low point of the entire day. Miami's favored by 5.5 on the road. They should have no problem handling the Nets. Nets still without a lot of different pieces and some pending buyouts around some guys. They didn't end up making moves, which is just kind of weird yesterday. But just a 210.5 point total in this one. Really, really low end game. Philly at Detroit. It's an okay spot. 228.5, 3.5 point spread favoring Philly on the road. I think you can get to the usual suspects from either side of that one, but nothing's going to stand out against some of the other critical values and stars from the big games. Bucks at the Hawks, 242.5 point total there. Bucks are favored by 5.5 on the road. A lot of road favorites. Obviously, as we can see, Giannis and Dame are coming out of the top end of that one. I also really like the looks of Trey. The Hawks are a team that made several swaps, so there's definitely some openings for Trey to just kind of do whatever he wants up at the top of the board. And then for some downstream value here, not seeing too many of those guys popping, though. Like Okongwu's down here. That's about where we would normally find them. Dyson Daniels not really landing all that firmly. So maybe it's just Trey and the top-end Bucks coming out of that one, and it's just all pay-up. But not bad as far as options go. Toronto at OKC. Toronto, another team missing many NBA players. They made a couple of trades. They have no big men anymore. 220, not no big men, but traded away a couple. 228-point total. They are 19-point underdogs on the road in OKC. OKC could reverse their units and still win that game by 15 points. Just start the end of the bench and do it backward and still win that game by that much. So big favorites there. And then the end of the night, the Jazz and the Suns, not on either slate. Both slates leaving it off. So sprint through the 8 o'clock hour. It's going to be fun. I like slates like this. Doesn't give a lot of time for late swapping. But you do have... Actually, no, it's only one game at 8 o'clock. So your late swapping is basically going to be taken care of through those 7:30 games as far as trying to flex some opportunity in one direction or another. The ins and the outs. All right. Probables. Donovan Mitchell, Haywood Highsmith, Nikola Jovic, Nick Claxton's available. Dame is probable. Brook Lopez is probable. Mohamed Gueye is available. So is Daquan Plowden. They're G League, back and forth two-way guys. They're both listed as available to play with the NBA team. Trae Young is probable. Paul George, Malik Beasley, Tobias Harris, and Dennis Jenkins is available. Questionables, Malcolm Brogdon, Justin Champagnie, Rashawn Holmes, some impact pieces there for the Wiz. LaMelo, again, questionable. If he's out there, I'm expecting moderate minutes. I don't think we get the full 35 or anything like that, but we'll see. Dalton Knecht is technically questionable. I've got him in. Nurk is also technically questionable. I've got him out right now. That was the original reporting on it. Haven't changed it yet, but we're keeping an eye on it, obviously. Kevin Love, Giannis, Pat Connaughton, Kyle Kuzma, Jericho Sims, Karis LeVert, Terrence Mann, George Niang. All of Kuzma, Sims, LeVert, Mann, and Niang are trade processing. Yabusele and Cade Cunningham are all questionable. Outs, Karis LeVert, Sam Merrill, George Niang. Do I have Niang listed twice? Oh, that's weird. 1 second. Let me confirm the actual status on Niang. And actually, we'll see if we got any news in that 4:30. Doesn't look like anything broke in the 4:30. At least Underdog didn't report anything, which is good. Oh, that's funny. I didn't catch it. Niang's listed twice because he's listed twice. The Cavs have him listed as out, trade pending, and the Hawks have him listed as questionable trade pending. That's helpful. I didn't catch that was the case. Is that also the case for LeVert? That is also the case for LeVert, so I probably said his name twice and didn't even realize it. Yeah. Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on these various statuses. That's why it's kind of annoying, because if they're going to list guys on two separate teams on the same injury report, you can see how that would be irritating. All right. So let's see. Continuing on, Isaac Okoro's out. JT Thor and Luke Travers are in the G League as of the last time this ran. Let's see if that has changed. That is still not changed. So the Cavs are going to be shorthanded here. Dean Wade out, Sadiq Bey, A.J. Johnson's out, Colby Jones, Alex Lang, Chris Middleton, Alex Sarr, Marcus Smart, Charles Bassey, Josh Green is doubtful, Trey Mann, Brandon Miller, Josh Okogie, Cam Reddish, Grant Williams, Kyle Anderson, Davian Mitchell, Drew Smith, Andrew Wiggins, Bojan Bogdanovic, Noah Clowney, Max Lewis, DeAnthony Melton, Ben Simmons, Cam Thomas, Tariq Whitehead, Kevin Porter Jr., Kobe Buffkin, Clint Capella, Bones Highland, Jalen Johnson, Andre Drummond, Jared McCain, Jaden Ivey, R.J. Barrett, Brendan Ingram, P.J. Tucker, James Wiseman, Ousmane Dieng, AJ Mitchell, and Cason Wallace, all not available. And why did I put that next to the wrong guy? OMG Lols has been on fire? Who's that? You've been on fire, or Dame's been on fire? Dame's definitely been on a heater. I think Mamba called that one. Sure, Mamba will come tell us. So let's get into breaking some of this down. We've got, again, some super appealing game environments with those two big totals. Guards first. So Mr. Lillard at the top of the board on both sides of this thing among the guards. Actually, we're getting a little bit more of Jacoby Walter on the FanDuel side, but that is a wildly different kind of a play, different kind of a player. Jacoby Walter's 4,100. Again, a lot of guys just floating up for Toronto for a lack of overall NBA bodies right now. So we're getting those guys. We're getting Jamal Shed floating into 30% of FanDuel lineups. Grady Dick, Jacoby Walter's in there. Toronto's probably just worth just putting on the board real quick. I would say they're more critical to the FanDuel slate, but we are getting a decent chunk at least of most of those guys. Where is... Oh. I don't know why my eyes were starting on Jacoby Walter. I was like, where is Mobo? Why is he not coming up? He's the top-owned guy on the DraftKings side. That's the interesting one at 3,100 on DK. Assuming you get like mid-20s minutes out of him, and again with just, you know, a dearth of big bodies, I think they're gonna. You've got Orlando Robinson there. You've got Chris Boucher there. I've already got Boucher at 20 minutes. I only threw O-Rob 8 minutes. That's kind of the threat, I think, to the Mobo play. So that's one to watch. If this swings to 18 fantasy points, it's a lot less appealing on the DraftKings slate, even at 31. But there are definitely values going through some of these bigs. And then on the FanDuel side, you're just getting a ton of Toronto. No matter how you slice it. Jamal Shed's coming up a lot. Grady Dick. Boucher's not coming up as much. But we're getting a ton of the guards and the wings. We're level with the field on Walter and on Grady Dick on the DraftKings slate. 27%, 18%. Just, it's a bad spot as far as like the quality of these players going up against the quality of the OKC players, but they're cheap enough that it's just going to float, just price over time is really all we're looking at. Rate almost doesn't even factor into it. Big, huge pool of shares of Bub Carrington for 3,300. It's multi-guard eligible, a 7+ value score. And why is his... He's been here all season. Why the hell does he not have his name fixed? Do we just never talk about Bub Carrington? Is this just how little Bub Carrington's come up for us over the course of the season that I never even bothered to add him here? Or maybe I've just never had to refer to his stats. Is he Bub in DraftKings? Or, wait, actually it's NBA that I want. Yeah, he's Bub. Maybe that just changed. Joker's here. He's excited about Bub Carrington being added to the stats board. There we go. So gave us 35.5 minutes. This is what I was looking for, was the last game. 35.5 minutes, 37.8 fantasy points. He's a .70 per minute player for the season, .73 on the DraftKings side. We're not expecting this kind of production for a point per minute, but at price on DraftKings at 33 with multi-guard eligibility, you don't need close to that. You would love to have close to that kind of production, but you don't need it for 33. So even if he comes out and he's closer to the .75, .73 type guy, I think you're perfectly fine going to that. 29% below the field on the FanDuel slate. It's not as strong a value. He's only eligible at the point guard spot. He is above our 5.0 value threshold, so he is important to the slate, but we're getting him a little bit less enthusiastically than the field. 4,500 is not as cushy a price as 33, so less appealing over here. I think it's important to have that position on him over there rather than getting overextended. Jordan Poole, on the other hand, we're getting a lot of. 7,200, eligible at both guard spots on FanDuel, 41% and well above the field. 1.09 per minute for the season, one of the few capable NBA guys that they're going to have out there. Giving him credit for a decent little uptick in the model. Given the game environment here as far as that total goes, there is appeal to getting to Jordan Poole. He's not a player I really trust. He's not a player I love getting to in gigantic portions. But on the right day in the right spot, when he's cresting in over the value threshold with a decent ceiling, it's the same situation for Washington as it is for Toronto, just going up against a good defensive team and just one of the best teams in the league that's going to obliterate them. But Poole is going to be still the guy who maintains the scoring, the guy who maintains the highest ceiling, the guy who's going to be at probably 30+% usage today. It's high 30s is most likely. So I definitely see it. 6,800 on DraftKings, only one guard spot, only point guard eligible, but doesn't seem to matter. We got him 40% of the time. It's more gently above the field, but similar distributions across both sites. I do think he looks good. Trey, again, just floating to the top for Atlanta with the various missing pieces. Plenty of time. 9,500 is not a bad price for his just standard 1.22 per minute. 1.29 per minute is aggressive on DraftKings. It's a big difference site to site with Trey as far as that production number goes. His season scoring average in fantasy scoring, 43.9 FanDuel points, 47.4 DraftKings points per game. It's a big difference. So got him, essentially around 2 points over his typical scoring average. If you're looking at the game, it's about a 0.1 increase per minute because, again, the points got to go somewhere. This is a big game environment. There's going to be some scoring here. So I like Trey to be doing it. Dyson Daniels coming out of the same thing because I was looking at the other sheet. Where did he go? There he is. 15% FanDuel, where he's 78 for 72 on DraftKings. I feel like he's just getting boxed out of shares probably by just some more concentrated ownership on some of these guys. Because it's technically a better value. But he's also got lower end per minute scoring on the DK scoring system. 1.05 per minute for Dyson Daniels on FanDuel. 0.99 per minute on DraftKings. So he's kind of the reverse situation there as far as that scoring format goes. But he's also difficult to nail down projection-wise. He will spike those big upside games. We've talked about it throughout the season. But I think this is typically where I'm happy coming down. Have some, be behind the field, 15%, gain leverage in other spots, 4% on DraftKings. If you come away with a few more shares, that's okay. If you're at 6-8%, you're probably fine. But I don't know how I would go over 10. Not at that price, not at 72. Not at 78 on FanDuel either. I guess I'm over 10, but not aggressive, you know what I mean. Good boy. All right, go lie down, huh? Mamba likes Koulibaly until he reaches 7K anyway. Where is he? There he is. 18% DraftKings. We got him a little bit below the field for 55. 15%. We got him a little bit below the field for 63. Small forward shooting guard eligible. He's been putting up 0.84 per minute on the season, 0.83 on DraftKings. Should see an uptick in usage and opportunity. I got him at... He's a guy we've been getting to a little bit. I had him in 2 nights ago? Last night? I forget when they last played. Um, 33. What do they got him owned? Oh, why did I click to the wrong side of that game? I'm going to put a little sticker on him. Just because I think there might be an opportunity to goose that rate a little bit more than the model did. I don't want to do it too much because it's Cleveland. Right now, he's just kind of getting credit for who he is in this situation without me putting a thumb on it. But if I want to put a thumb on it and give him a little tiny uptick in rate to account for the changes with the squad here, there's room. You give him another point or two, fantasy-wise. Probably not 2, but like point and a half. If I make that... Yeah, like I said, I'm going to put a little sticker on him here and use yellow for these guys. D'Angelo Russell sneaky today, you think? I only have him at 26 minutes. Not really seeing much there. But obviously, if you're giving him like 32 minutes, then you're talking a completely different story. Yeah, I just have a light spread on all these minutes. I don't have Simmons in here. I just have everybody, kind of in the mid-20s, topping out at 30. So it could get adjusted as we go toward lock. I do that, with some of these teams where it's a little bit nebulous. I'll put a lot of guys in the 20s, and then when we get starters or whatever, I'll adjust. So it could change a little bit. You're going to 30? Has he been there though? Whoops. Did not mean to open that. We did get 29 handful of games ago. So, it's been over 30 once since joining the team. He's at 28 once, 29 once. Everything else is 26 or less. And it's not like we haven't had games in that mix with this setup, or essentially this setup of the team as far as minutes go. But there's definitely a range there. I'm just kind of on the lower end of the range. But like I said, we could definitely see that tick up at worst to 28, something like that. You're not wrong in that he could definitely be sneaky, because I don't know that he's very much on the board. So if he does anything, what's his public ownership looking like? It's going to be low owned. So you were definitely not wrong that he's sneaky, Doug. Mama's at the airport on the way to New Orleans. Going to the game? Hopefully when I get off the plane, I'll be 100K richer. I like that. Wemby price tag on FanDuel is higher than Giannis. Is it actually? I hadn't actually processed that. But it's not crazy. 1.65 per minute versus 1.66 per minute. It's pretty negligible. It's a little bit bigger of a gap on DraftKings. 167 for Giannis, 162 for Wemby. But, I mean, that's something we've been looking at for a long time. Last year, Wemby outperformed Giannis in a per minute sense. 171 per minute versus 163. And as I stressed last year, and I'll continue to stress until he's an aging veteran, that was the worst we're ever going to see Victor Wembanyama, and he did that. So I don't think it's crazy that he's in the same price range, or that he's at a higher price by $200 on FanDuel. You could have it the other way around, and I wouldn't have blinked an eye at it, having Giannis up at the top. I would also say that you could throw SGA up at the top, and I wouldn't have really batted an eye at it, although his rate is not quite as strong as the other two. But it's all close. Any one of those three, in terms of which one you want, the stars you can just kind of rotate. But right now, Giannis looking the strongest as far as our distributions go. Part of that is probably a little bit of the price difference. Part of that is a little bit of just how the game environment is floating him up and how highly he's projected. But definitely looking strong. Anthony Taylor says, since I never play 150 T's, a subscription I should utilize. Yeah, man. Under $1 a day for access to everything at Roto Scouts. So you can play this basketball slate, tonight's hockey slate, tomorrow and tomorrow night's hockey and basketball slates. Sunday, you get the Super Bowl. You get the hockey and basketball slates, whatever they're going to be doing on Sunday. You get all next week of main slates for basketball and hockey. And then we're crashing right into baseball season. And you get all of it. Not per sport, not $1 here, $1 there, not a uptick next month if you sign up this month. It's under $1 a day on a weekly, monthly, or quarterly plan. So for under $7, you're getting through next week. Not too shabby. And if you are a 150 maxer, it works just as well. You get all the info you need. If you're only a hand builder, if you're only building 1, 5, 10 lineups, that's kind of who I'm gearing toward. Want to make it make sense for people who aren't putting thousands of dollars a day in. But yeah, it'll work just as well for everybody on both sides of that. So trying to make it nice and affordable. And as I was saying the other day, for the price of literally one egg, you can get access to this for the rest of the week. Not the rest of the week, for a week. Anyway, let's get back into back on track with some of these guards here. So to pick up some time. So Koulibaly, I didn't have to flip that screen actually. He's already right here. So if we give him a little bit of an uptick, and what I'm considering is he's at 0.83 for the season. The models got him at like 0.86, 0.87 today, and giving him another point would take him to like 0.89, 0.90. And I think that's about where I would cut it off. But that would get him more like, level with the field probably. 20, 22, 25% on DraftKings. Closer to the field on FanDuel, but probably still short. Probably just a little uptick to like 18 or so over there. It's a big price difference. 6,300 small forward shooting guard versus 5,500 site to site. So definitely more value on DraftKings. Max Strus looking like an Izzy is spot on FanDuel. Nothing special there at 5% and below the field. 4,500 though on DraftKings. Shooting guard, small forward eligible. He's just a 0.84 per minute guy, a moderate usage guy. Needs to knock down the shots that he takes when he's out there. 16.67% and level with the field. This is one that if I'm forgoing some Sam Merrill shares, or some Max Strus shares rather, to get to a couple of these guys that are around him. Like if I'm taking more Grady Dick shares and leaving some of those $4,500 Max Strus shares on the table, I think that's okay. And building a little plus position on a better value at the 5.90 value for Grady Dick, while leaving the 5-4-6 value for the more expensive player kind of behind and building a negative position there. I think that's okay. It's also okay to play it just, kind of both even with the field like this because they're just functional pieces on this slate. But I think that I'd rather take it in that direction. Ty Jerome, again, for all the buzz he was getting early in the day, I'm kind of surprised he didn't come up a little bit more. I don't think we're off the mark as far as his numbers. 114 per minute, 116 per minute on DraftKings. I've got him at 26. Could see a little bit of an uptick in, with the idea that they could be up by 25 points in the third quarter. So might see a little bit of additional run that way. But gonna play decent minutes. Everybody on Cleveland is because they are very short-handed going into this one. 17% at a 5.14 value score on FanDuel. 16% at a 5.97 on the DraftKings slate. Part of it might be that he's just getting a little bit squeezed by the Jamal Sheds of the world at 35. And there's some back and forth between these value Cleveland guys and these value Toronto guys for sure. Probably closer to here. I think I might take, and this is going to sound silly and not even worth mentioning, but I might take about a half a point away from Jamal Shed. Just because it's OKC on the other side of that one. We did get him a lot. 30% on FanDuel. At 3,500, we got him less. 6.4 value. Just got a lot to work with on DraftKings. Surprised he came up more on FanDuel at the 41 than at 35, though. 30% gently above the field on the FanDuel slate. Again, you're just going to be uncomfortable with some of these Jacoby Walters and Jamal Sheds moderate per minute contributors that are coming from Toronto, and it's just going to be a matter of price over minutes. Like I said before, the rate almost doesn't factor into it. SGA didn't really come up on the FanDuel slate. 11-8, just probably not a good fit at the point guard spot when we're getting so much of Dame going through there. And then we're getting a pretty okay chunk anyway of Trey. And then we've got to make room for all those value guys. So we're getting more spend on some of the bigs. But if you were swapping out some of those Dames, you could probably claw your way all the way up to SGA shares. It would be at the expense of Giannis in one of the big man spots. But you could get to SGA and a moderately priced, $7,000-$8,000 big man in that spot as the switch. So it's not a terrible spot. And honestly, if he's going to be low owned by the field, that might be one worth considering pivoting some shares into. If you build a plus position on SGA, that's perfectly fine. You're just shaping your entries differently, but you're doing it deliberately on one of the highest upside players in the entire NBA. 14%, you're already getting there somewhat on DraftKings because he's 1,100 cheaper site to site. 1.58 per minute on the DraftKings slate, looking pretty good. It's a little different there, though, since we're already getting a pretty decent-sized chunk, and the field is presumably in like the 20% range against this ownership. It's not exactly the same because this would be doing it against presumably single-digit 8-10% maybe ownership. With this, you'd need to build a little bit larger of a anti-optimizer, anti-sim kind of a position. You can always get there. Any given lineup, he's going to be perfectly functional. And again, one of the highest overall ceilings in the entire league. So it's never a mistake to include him in a lineup. It's just not in his spot, but it creates potential mistakes in other spots if you get too exposed to him. But again, we've got him 14%. That means any given lineup, totally fine. Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell coming up in at least decent doses, 22% and level with the field on Garland on FanDuel, 11% below the field on DraftKings. On Mitchell, we got 16%, hard undercut to the field on FanDuel, but still 16%. Only 9% on DraftKings, but a gentler undercut to the field. Same price across sites, 464, 478, value scores 484, 504. This is your best value spot technically out of the four, but we're getting the most shares there of Garland. My one thing with these guys, I do think the minutes are going to be mostly there. Like, even in a blowout situation, they're going to at least have to play their usual low 30s minutes. The difference in whether they would go rocketing into lineups or not is if you give them credit for like 35, 36 minutes, thinking that they're going to just, regardless of score, just be out there because the team is shorthanded. And I don't know that they do that, particularly like Mitchell took a bump in that game the other day and then was questionable. Like, I don't know that they're necessarily going to press that button down. I think they would just empty the bench, run the scrubs out there, and let the scrubs just get gassed. So I kept them at like 32, but there is upside there. And it's not like we're not getting them. I would not mind a few more shares over there because, again, this is a great spot, and they should absolutely crush the Wizards. Tyler Hero in that low-end Miami-Brooklyn game, mix and match, 18% below the field on FanDuel, 6% way below the field on DraftKings, or firmer relative undercut. I shouldn't say way below the field on that one. He's 8,500 in the lowest end game of the day. I just don't love it. Same with Zaire Williams, Terry Rozier. Mix and match pieces for any of those guys on the DraftKings slate. We have a little bit more of Zaire Williams. We have a little bit more of Tyler Hero on the FanDuel side. Some good players buried down here. Cade, if he plays. Another guy that you could throw into the mix of the any given slate. It's not, or any given lineup. It's not necessarily a mistake. Maxey, another high ceiling player who's not really showing much, just priced correctly or arguably a little bit high. 1.20, 1.22 per minute, though. He's been very good. Cade's at 135, 140. LaMelo hiding down here. I've got him at 30, but again, I think the range is it was like, that's probably the top. It's probably like 26 to 30. You know, I can't really imagine, even in a close game, I can't really imagine them really, really pressing it. It's not looking great at 98. We didn't get any shares at all. If you give him a few more minutes, he would probably pop up, and we know what the fully healthy LaMelo looks like. De'Aaron Fox, somebody mentioned, coming up middle of the board, 9,300. Price is kind of up on FanDuel already. 2.6% over there. At just 85, I would have expected maybe a little bit more of him on DraftKings. He's point guard and shooting guard eligible. He's only a 4.52 value, though. This clicks in my head as a better price than it actually mass out to. And it's definitely better relative to the FanDuel price. But we really didn't get that much. 267. I think you could take a few more shares there. And he's probably in the same mixes like Maxey, Cunningham right around him. Tyler Hero, and honestly Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland are kind of in that mix too. So any of these three, and like any of those three, distribute that 35% of shares however you really want to among those guys. There's a lot of just flexible back and forth between those spots. They're not coming up all that dissimilar. But keep in mind, with most of them, the best you're going to be doing there is building back to the field. You know, you take other guys down further, and then you dump those shares into the best one. There's like mid-board guys in that range. Devin Vassell, 67, 65 across sites, 4% on DraftKings. Did not get him on FanDuel. He's fine. There's a little bit of upside there, but ultimately he's a sub 1 per minute guy. 0.95, 0.96. Takes plenty of opportunities. 22.8% usage rate. 53.6% true shooting. Kispert, a mix and match type. 6%, 3%. No real enthusiasm there. We do have an outlier, Garrison Matthews, on FanDuel, 28%. That's still below the field. He's a 4.87 value. I would go to pretty great lengths to get away from additional Garrison Matthews shares there, I think. I don't love that one. It's just a product of that cheap price. It's pulling through probably the small forward spot. I'm not going to knock him down artificially, but I really don't love it. 0.77 per minute in this game environment. He's pushed up in the model by 3/100ths of a point per minute to 0.80, which I think is fine. I just don't love it. If I'm building a handful of lineups, hand building them and curating them, I think I would probably not use that much of this. If I'm running off 150 through sims and everything, I might give them a little bit of a negative penalty and try and get it down to like 20%, but then I would just take those 1 in 5 shares. Depends on how you go about things with that one. It's just a low-end player, low usage guy. This season he's seen a little bit more when he's been out there, but it's in 18 minutes a night over 42 games in this ninth man role that he plays, 10th man. Last year, 0.56 per minute on 11% usage. I don't know. Kate says Doug went through shoot around, or Doug says Cade went through shoot around. Yeah, if I had, it would be nice if there was some sort of middle tier there between like probable and questionable. Like likely. Is likely less likely than probable? I'm not sure. But yeah, I would call him likely as opposed to questionable or probable. So I think he'll be out there. Not much else going down the board at guard. Let's get the forwards and the centers on the screen here. All right. So again, Giannis dominating the top of the board in shares. Tremendous game environment. Should be able to abuse Atlanta. 1.67 per minute for the season from Giannis. For this one, we're checking in. I believe he's above 1.7. Yeah, 1.73 for this one. So a little bit of an uptick there. If you wanted to knock him down and just say, hey, I want to give Giannis just his average, it's essentially exactly 2 fantasy points on the DraftKings scale. But I like the uptick spot. You could say that if they're up big, maybe we see 33, 32 minutes out of Giannis instead of 35. But I think in that scenario, we've probably already gotten there. So absolutely all the Giannis you can carry alongside game is perfectly fine for anybody who's noodling with that question. We talked about it a few times through the year, but that's just not something we really worry about these days. It's 4 or 5 years ago at this point where we were, all right, we'll block this out. We use groups to avoid that scenario. And it turns out it just doesn't really matter. The numbers are what they are. So Mobo, again, I do think there's fragility here. I don't know for sure that we're getting those mid-20s minutes, but logic would suggest that we are. Looking like a very good value, power forward and center eligibility on FanDuel. And for every additional minute that he plays, he becomes more and more value exponentially because he's a good per minute player so far in his young career. So at 3,900 on FanDuel, we're getting him 24% of the time, a little bit above the field. On DraftKings for 31, we're getting him way above the field. Now, what I will say is I have him projected a little bit differently than the site that the ownership comes from. So the relative exposure here that we're looking at as far as the against the field number might be a little bit more gentle. Depends on your source. In their ownership, he's a lot lower than I think he is actually going to be. I suspect that he would be higher in different sources, and we'd be closer to like level, these kinds of distributions maybe against the field, looking something like that. The numbers here, our exposures are correct. They are what they are for our numbers. But again, it did run against lighter overall public ownership for him. So just bear that in mind. Holmes, assuming he's out there. I prefer Mobo, even with the fragility of it, because I don't exactly consider Holmes entirely secure. But Holmes is also a guy who is a good per minute performer. We've seen it in years past. 0.97 per minute in his limited action this year. He's played in 13 games this year, averaging 12.6 minutes a night. So there's not a lot of meat on the bone sample-wise from this season. We don't exactly know what it's going to look like, and he's going up against a very, very good Cleveland front court. So while price over, potential time over rate is going to make it look good, I can see a very clear path through which Richaun Holmes underperforms this spot. So I don't think he's any more or any less fragile than the Mobo play above him. They're both coming in at 7+ values on DraftKings, way over 5.5 on FanDuel. Got to get there. Do you roll those guys out together? That becomes a question of how you want to spend your value shares. They probably don't land together too much, given how much is going through power forward and center from our pay-ups, and then how many other values there are in those positions. Like 2-3 spots later is Moussa Diabate, who's coming in at 32% center only with a 6+ value score on DraftKings. Keyshawn George is going through some of those forward spots. But if you want to think of it in terms of like limiting any given lineup's fragility, then maybe you start playing that game of like, all right, two fragile guys in the Mobo and Holmes minutes. Maybe we go one or the other and just take any one of these other value guys in that spot and then alternate. But you can absolutely. That's about risk tolerance, not the quality of how it would math out. So that's just one lineup risk tolerance type thing. You think Holmes is going to be out? So, and thank you for mentioning Vukovic. He's in here somewhere, but he's not coming up right now. But that is the guy who would then get it. Right now at 16 minutes, he's not showing anything. But if you just swapped him up, he would look better than Richaun Holmes because he's only 3,000 on DraftKings. At 3,000, his low-end 16-minute score is already above our value threshold on DK at 5.67. Again, we're looking for 5.5 there. So for everything you give him, he's just going to rocket up the board. Oh, let's see. They might have actually, the people whose ownership we're using might have moved him. Let's see. Yeah, they leveled that up a little bit. They who do they pull those minutes from though? I don't know where because they didn't take the Holmes minutes away. Interesting. So yeah, that would be the spot to watch. He would rocket up the board, and it would matter less any downside from just the impact of playing against Cleveland at that $3,000 price. It's a great price spot. So, yeah, we'll watch the news there. We'll watch what the lineup looks like. You could just get him starting. Let's keep on rolling here. What else we got? Now we're into the Abates, the Bouchers, the Joviches of the world, Kongwu, Risache. I'm obviously skipping a few good names in there. Like Jalen Williams, popping up pretty strong on FanDuel at 42%, getting into a bunch of our lineups relative to the field for 8,300. I like that a lot. 1.25 per minute. OKC is supposed to get Chet back for probably a half a chunk of time, a half a game. But he is supposed to be out there a little bit. Could be a minor impact as far as the rate goes, but Jalen's looking pretty strong at 83. Fits into both forward spots on FanDuel, both forward spots on DraftKings. 26% exposed in our top 150 lineups and above the field on the DK slate. I like that. We're slightly closer to our value threshold on FanDuel at 497 than at 511 on DraftKings, but we're very close either way. Definitely looks like a piece and has upside ceiling ability. So I like that. And he's one of those guys that I would keep in mind if you're making that that Dame for SGA swap that I mentioned that would take you out of your Giannis share. That's essentially the same amount going from Giannis down to Jalen as going up from Dame to Shea. And then you'd be landing on 2 OKC guys instead of 2 Milwaukee guys, which is an odd little twist. But I do think that is the correct person to think of in that spot. You do also have like Evan Mobley's there. And I didn't actually go check that number, but I'm pretty sure it's close. So you do have some options for taking that approach. Bam is not far off that territory at 82. Obviously, Sim's out worse. The numbers don't really support the Bam play. That is the lowest end game of the day. But he's there at that price with reasonable ability to put points on the board. So he would be an alternative in that. But again, every time you do something like that, you are defying the math to a degree. Mobley, 20% on the FanDuel side, below the field, level with the field, 23% on DraftKings. Another player on the Cleveland side should just be able to absolutely abuse this Washington team. So no issues loading up a little bit more. If you're 25 on either side, you're perfectly fine. Even if you're pushing 30 plus and you're just building a plus position on him, I don't think that's necessarily a mistake. The Cleveland side of that looks good enough. So picking any one of their stars/starters, not a bad decision if you're going to just build up from here. Koulibaly we talked about. Boucher's a tricky one because he's part of that mix for Toronto as well. Could see more than the 20 I gave him. And he's coming up as a strong value at 4,000 on FanDuel, center and power forward eligible, 5.38 value score. We're below the field there, 15% and pretty aggressively below the field. Closer to the field at our 18% on DraftKings, where he's only 34 and a 6+ value. You give him 24 minutes and he's going to look a lot better. So it's another one to just kind of watch where the numbers go. If you see this start to creep up, get more of it. If you see it, and it sounds real obvious, but it becomes a situation where every point is a pretty significant step up. So if you see it go up just even by, a point or two, you might want to grab some more. If you see it go down by a point or two, you might want to grab a little bit less. Yeah, O-Rob's the wild card in that spot, Doug. I mentioned him before when I was teeing up the show. And knowing how things go, that's probably exactly who's going to get into that mix. But we'll see. That's going to be the fun of it for those of us who have to be on top of last-minute changes. There was one that came down yesterday. I was trying to get my lineups out of the sim, or out of the optimizer into the sim, kick the sim off, take other lineups out of it, and start doing my own thing in the last 10 minutes before lock. And something changed yesterday at like 52 or 53 that pushed me back to, I finally took my lineups out of Ace Mind at I think 58, and then was like, frantic, sort, try and get it in there, paste it in. It was after 59 or 29, I guess. It was a 7:30 start last night. But it was close. It was down to the wire. So, yeah, the fewer last-minute changes we could get, the better. Nikola Jovic, a mix-and-match piece. 3% on FanDuel. A lot better looking on DraftKings for 5,200. I think he's just a solid mid-board type play on the DK slate at that price, where it's just kind of going to land him into some lineups. But I don't think that he's a standout play all that much more than, say, $5,500 Koulibaly on the other side, or on the 2 spots up. He's a little bit more expensive, but neither one of those guys stands out all that much relative to the other one. I think you can get decent shares of both, and if you prefer one, like it sounds like Chat prefers Koulibaly a little bit, then I think you could juice Koulibaly up a little at the expense of Jovic, and something else for that $300. That's always the issue when you're making that decision, though, and it's a little bit different positionally unless you're just talking about the pure forward spot. But the something else is always the thing that gets left out of that question. All right, if I can go from this guy to that guy, sure, if you can do it, but the something else, that $300 is not unimportant. Struce, we talked about. Wemby we've referred to, but haven't really dove into. 17% on FanDuel. That's below the field. But if you can fit more Wemby, take more Wemby. It's pretty straightforward. 11,000 on DraftKings. you could make a pretty good argument that he should be more highly owned than this on DK. He's getting boxed out by some of these Giannis shares that are at a just slightly better value mark, even at the $800 higher salary. There's a 5-point gap in projection. Part of that comes out of the minutes, right? We're talking about guys that are 1.67, 1.62. So the 2-minute difference that I've got on Giannis and Wemby creates most of that gap. But if you think Giannis plays 33, 32, not 35 today, or if you think Wemby in the San Antonio-Charlotte game for reasons is a closer, more hard-fought game, and Wemby plays 35 or 34, then it evens out very, very quickly. Mama says, with all the flights going down, and I'm in me being in 100% agreement with Doug today, I think I might switch my flight. Talked about Mobo. He's number 2 up here. So on DK at 3,100, Mamba, fire away. I think it's there. That's with a 25-minute projection. But as I was saying, I do think it's fragile. It's not the most secure play, but the price is absolutely right. And it comes down to, with the fragility, like I said before, it ultimately just comes down to your risk tolerance. And I suspect, Mamba, that your risk tolerance is relatively high, given the conversations we've had. But, you do have O-Rob there, right? So if you see Orlando Robinson step into the starting lineup, then I think you just can directly switch those guys. But it would also kind of level it out. Right now, I've just got O-Rob at 8 minutes. But even in the situation that exists that's projected here, there is fragility of just like, this looks more like 22 and that becomes 11. That has an impact. Not a plus impact for Robinson, but definitely a minus impact on the Mobo side of it. So that's what I'm talking about when I say there's fragility. If we get Robinson into the starting lineup, I don't know that I get him all the way to the 25, 24, 25, because I would still want to have a piece from Mobo there, in which case maybe Robinson's more in the 22 kind of minute range because we're spreading some out. So it definitely gets sticky around that spot. And that's what I mean when there's fragility there. But if he can get these 25 minutes, he looks like one of the better plays on that DraftKings slate. 3,100 is very cheap for a 0.89 per minute big. So he's making a lot of things work. Down the board here with some of these guys. So we're on Wemby. Again, any given lineup, any given slate, you're not making a mistake if Victor Wembanyama's in it smiling at you. Right? He is not your concern. Your concern is, all right, what did that cost me in other spots to some degree? But on a day where he and Giannis rival one another and are offset by price differently on both sides, it's never going to be a mistake. Okongwu, don't know if we need him, but he is coming up at 19% on the FanDuel board. 71 is pretty cheap. That is an interesting little, not secret on this slate, because it looks like we're 1 in 5 of every lineup out there is going to have him. But I suspect part of that is that power forward eligibility pulling him through. Maybe not even, because there's not many pure center only guys. 4.96 is decent value. I was not expecting to see that much. I thought we would be a little bit below the field and like 12%ish, kind of like where we are on DraftKings. He's 63 on DK, 10.6%. We're level with the field over there as well. 5.43 is just under our value threshold on both sites. Okongwu looks playable, and again, that game environment is floating some good plays, so I have no issues with taking one of the better players out of the Atlanta side. Jalen Duren, this is more the trajectory against the field that I thought we would find Okongwu at. 9%, 8% across sites. Not a bad overall player in a per minute sense. 1.16, 1.14. Just at this position, even with a price advantage, he's just getting squeezed out of those shares. There's so many guys going through that spot that are either significantly less than him or significantly more than him. and it's just not coming up. I do think there's any given lineup value there, but you also wrestle with his minutes. We get a lot of right around this 26-minute average. We get a lot of more limited games. The days where he spikes the minutes upside is where you get the good Duren performances. Got him at 29 today. We're giving him credit for a little bit, and we're really not getting there. So I don't know that you push the issue with that one. Ricochet's just fine. Could see a few additional minutes. Again, shorthanded Atlanta team after the deals that they made, but they've got a few guys. Or do they? Trying to remember which pieces are where. Yeah, they've got a few guys listed technically as questionable, so we got to see how that all shakes out. Ricochet is not somebody I'm really excited to get to anyway. 4,500 is about correct for the 0.83 that you're getting out of him. I don't see too much there. He's already at 26 minutes. We're not getting much. 5,400 on FanDuel especially. I really don't think you go there. At 45, it's a playable dice roll. A little bit of a lotto ticket. This is our Thompson mix and match, 8%. We do have a pretty broad range of guys where we're getting at least a few shares of a lot of guys through here. I feel like more so at forward than we were at guard or forward and center. Bam on FanDuel comes up, not so much on DraftKings. 24% FanDuel below the field. Harder undercut to the field at 7% on the DraftKings slate. I mentioned him before in being able to swap back and forth for guys at a similar price if you're doing that Dame for SGA swap coming off of Giannis shares. I think he's at least playable in that role, but he's not really bouncing up for shares as far as just, is who he is spot. The matchup's great. The game is not. Like the opponent is a pushover, but overall the game is not in terms of how many points are even going to be scored. Johnny Salon, another guy. Mix and match on FanDuel. I could do entirely without those. 3,800, both forward spots. I think pretty much every time at the power forward, I would probably just take the risk on the Mobo. I guess if the $100 matters, that's your alternative. Don't love that spot. 0.70 per minute in his limited action this season, averaging 18.5 minutes a night. Last time out, 21 points in 21 minutes. Obviously, if you get that for your 3,800, you're doing okay. And I've got him at 24 minutes. So if you can maintain something like that per minute number, then you're going to want him. But that is not really what I'm projecting him for. I've got him right around his season long. So mix and match shares through a lot of these guys. Bam's one, Salon's one. Embiid coming off of a couple DMPs after the monster performance the last time out, or one DMP, I guess. But he had a very solid return to action in their last game, or his last game. 32 minutes of Joel Embiid for 10,000. You could do worse. It only puts him at a 4.7 value score. He's played at 1.47 so far for this season. Got him right in that range, I think. I've got him literally exactly on that number, actually. Kind of the mid game of the night, 228.5 point total. It's technically the second lowest of the slate, but we're talking about 228.5 with a 229, 230 on the board also. I could see him going out there and ripping off another big performance for the money at 10,000. That's not a terrible price. If you want to throw him into the mix of, again, I'm coming off of Giannis. Who do I go to? And I've got a little bit of money to spend. I could see it. He's not unplayable. On FanDuel at 10-6 with the single center, I don't love it. We got him 2% of the time. A couple shares is fine. I wouldn't get overly carried away with it. 6% a piece of Agbaji and Jarrett Allen. Agbaji, one of the guys from Toronto, not really trending up too much. He is at a 5.35 value score. I gave him 24. He played just under 22 the last time out and was well above a point per minute, 26.6 fantasy points. But overall, we're talking about a guy who's 0.75 this year on 13% usage. 13% usage last year was 0.64. Plenty for everybody to do in Toronto today. But going up against OKC, there's a lot working against the success of the Agbaji play, even at price. I do think he's a reasonably playable alternative to any of these guys in an individual sense. Any given lineup, if you've got $3,300 Agbaji in a power forward share instead of Mobo, or instead of Keyshawn George, instead of Chris Boucher, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But the way he comes up, he's the least favorite out of that group right now. Jared Allen, you can take some more shares of. I continue to really like that price on Jared Allen on DK at 64. At 72 on FanDuel, he's going to be in some lineups for me. 12%. We're under the field there, but a tremendous upside spot. I can't stress it enough for the Cleveland Cavaliers today. I'm surprised we didn't get a little bit more, but it's been hitting this way. Remember, we put him on the board the other day from like down in this territory to compare to three guys that were up here. And I kind of think he's hiding in that same spot today. There's not a ton of public ownership. You'd have to do a little bit of work here to get him above the field in what we've got. But I don't mind getting at least more. Let's see where the field is. Ooh, they've climbed. Yeah, that's unfortunate. I think they were lower earlier when this ran. The field is now roughly 3 times that number, so you would have to do a lot of bending and breaking of things to really get them to that. That said, if you had them 10-12 against the field's number, that's 3 times this, roughly. I think you're okay. I just really like having Jared Allen at that price in this game. Williams mix and match Portis in 24 minutes would not be all that appealing. If Giannis doesn't go and Portis is in this role where he put up 61.9 FanDuel points in 32 minutes the other day, you know what to do. Just fire away Bobby Portis. That is the spot of spots. Khalil Ware is a different play across sites. 6,100, I was wondering where he was. Nearly 40% of our lineups with a bullet on the FanDuel slate. He's the one piece that's kind of coming out of that Miami-Brooklyn game right now. On DraftKings for 6,000, didn't get him. I think part of that has got to be that Giannis is going through some of those center shares because Giannis doesn't have that eligibility on FanDuel. That's almost definitely what it is. So just more opportunity to get to Khalil Ware. I think he's just as good a play on DraftKings. He's above our value threshold at 5.60. And maybe that's the guy. Maybe that's the Jared Allen play of today. Because this one, it looks like our 5% maybe staying stable. Yeah, you probably just saw the exaggerated look of shock on my face a second ago. So the Ware ownership has come down from here as the Allen ownership has grown in the other spot. We're now technically 3 to 4 times the field, but obviously at a very low number. If you wanted to put your thumb on the scale on some Khalil Ware shares here, I don't think that's crazy where you can roster him alongside any of these top-end center guys. 5.60, the value's already there. He's played at 1.06. They're going up against Brooklyn. There should be nothing really to stop him from doing his thing. That is interesting if he's going to be owned in the low single digits by the public. Again, it's entirely different on FanDuel. There's just more opportunity to roster him. But it's not a function really of price. 61 versus 6,000. 5.6 values there, 5.6 value over here too. The per minute number is slightly better on the FanDuel slate with that scoring. But he is almost as strong a play here as he is over here. I'm not saying go put 40% of them in your pocket against the field's 2%. But a little bit more than this might not be a terrible idea. Devin Vassell, mix and match. We already talked about him. Onesie, twosie shares on everybody down in this range. Kispert, Champagny, Claxton, Barlow, Vic Krejci. Miles Bridges is the most relevant name that's down here. 11% of them on FanDuel. Didn't really get him at all on DK. He's 9,000 on DK. Ugh. 117 has seen a little bit of an uptick recently, but we might have LaMelo back at least in a partial role. So there could be a downturn in that recent uptick in production. Not somebody I'm excited to get to. If I have a few shares, it's fine, but I wouldn't go looking to build him into a lineup, really. Onesie twosies on Jaime Jaquez, Tobias Harris. Hartenstein, love the player, but not the DFS fit of the day at 74, 7,000 center only. A couple shares is fine, not a priority by any means. Kuzma expected to make his debut with the Bucks. The spot exists for the Bucks roster as a whole, but I gave Kuzma 30 minutes here, and he's not coming up. 0.94 per minute for 6,400. There's just better options to fill those spots. And could play fewer minutes. I think I was a little generous there. Larry Nance, we got into a couple shares. That's weird. Wasn't expecting that. Why the hell did we get 5% Larry Nance? 18 minutes. Look where that projection is. That might be a weird outlier price. That 43 is just... It doesn't exactly bounce off any other power forward eligible prices. That might be a weird little just pocket that those shares popped up in because there was some money to spend there, but you couldn't get all the way up to a $4,600 Keyshawn George share. So just by default, it's taking those $4,300 Larry Nance shares. I don't think there's any real appeal there. If you reran this, you could easily, I think, come up with zero there. Again, they are shorthanded, but this is with him at 18 minutes. It's not a strong spot. I'm losing till I win the Millies here. What's up, buddy? Millie, I'll put everybody back on the board for you to answer that question. So right now, our two most highly exposed players on DraftKings, good news, two superstars. Or a superstar and a star maybe trending toward his days of decline, but not there yet. I don't know exactly how to describe Dame in that sense. But two terrific players up at the top in Dame and Giannis. You can absolutely put those guys together over and over again in lineups today on DraftKings. And then you got a lot of value guys surrounding them. We talked about some fragility that exists with Jonathan Mobo and with Rashawn Holmes. We don't know exactly how that's going to shake out. Rashawn Holmes, Doug, for example, in the chat there, seems to think that Holmes isn't going to play, in which case it would just directly go over to Vukovic, the backup, who costs only $3,000 there as opposed to the $35,000. So technically would probably look even better than Holmes and would maybe make it a situation where you don't necessarily need the Mobo fragility play there. I think he would box this out a little bit. You got Bub Carrington sitting there at just $3,300 on the DraftKings slate. Does not need to do much and is projected over a 7 value. He's a core value guy. These are just your stepstone, building block value types. And then you get to some pretty decent options. We've got a lot of trade to work with at 96. Some of that is probably in lieu of Dame in those shares, but not all of it. We've got some decent shares of Jordan Poole, who's not a terrible performer. 1.14 per minute is not a bad number for DFS. Think what you want of him as an NBA player. He's not nearly my favorite player, but as a DFS performer, when he lands at the right price, it can work. Then we get back into some of the values. The Jacoby Walters of the world. A lot of Toronto guys are coming up in that department. Grady Dick right here. Jacoby Walter right there. We get a few of the Cleveland guys coming up. Ty Jerome, Max Strus are coming up a little bit. There's Chris Boucher, speaking of other Toronto guys. So you definitely want to be paying attention to some of your game environment stuff. Right? There are two juicy-looking games. The Cavs and the Wizards I'm back to the old sheet, so forgive me if these are slightly different, but 17-point spread with a 237.5 point total. That's why Giannis and Dame are going to be expected to cook here. And then that's the Cleveland and the Wizards game. That's why the Cavs are coming up pretty decent amongst the starters. And then some of the Wizards guys, they're shorthanded on both sides of that game, are coming up for value with the high total. Milwaukee and Atlanta, that's why Dame and Giannis are expected to cook. 242.5 point total in that one. 5.5 point spread. Also a more competitive game. Right? That one's not one of our double-digit games. Toronto's the spot that I'm most concerned about among those teams that are getting floated a little bit by good game environments, just because it's OKC on the other side. That worries me a little bit. Looks like Ware wasn't scoring in that Brooklyn game. When was that game? Could be part of it too. The Heat are definitely not the most reliable with minutes. That was just on what? I know that's December. Scroll back too far. January 25th. Yeah, Jovic had 17 and 10. Jovic played 30. Yeah, I think whoever answered in the chat there, like Power says, I think it was just a little bit of lack of production in that one. I would definitely not think so with Chet, Millie. Hartenstein is playable, but wasn't really coming up. Yeah, Chet, even at 7,700, it's only because I only gave him 22 minutes. I don't really expect more, but the range is probably 22 to 26. But I don't consider Chet playable right now. Willing to be wrong about that one. Hartenstein, though, like I said, very good player. Love the player. Not the best DFS fit today. 7,000, you can get there, but we're sub 5 value when we're looking for 5.5. We did get him once. 1.23 per minute. Again, he's a terrific player, even from a fantasy sense as far as accruing stats. We just have so many good options going through the big man spots on DK today that he doesn't really work price-wise. He's just not a fit for this slate. Not incorrect to bring him up because, again, competitive rate, very, very good player, but not the right day for him. Yeah, I think that Ware thing is just was just a little bit of lack of effectiveness in that one for whatever reason. Throwing Nicky Claxton and Jalen Wilson at him. Anyway, I think that's about rounding us off. We're at 5:49. Damn, went quick. I don't think we left anybody off the board too much. Well, Malik Beasley stands out. 8% level with the field right there. Not stands out in a you need to go play him kind of a way. Just popped in front of me that he was 8% level with the field on FanDuel. Jumped out at me a little bit. But not a player I'm rushing to roster in really any slate. It's been a lot better of a fantasy performer in his opportunity this year, though. Nice uptick in usage year over year. Nice uptick in production to go along with it. We all know that he can get there when he hits some of those shots. Nobody else. A couple shares of all of these Isaiah Joes of the world. Scotty Barnes is kind of a standout down here that at least warrants mentioning because he's not coming up. even with Toronto looking juicy, it's more about just the super cheap guys who are going to stumble their way into minutes for just the opening of some opportunity there. So it doesn't really have that impact on Scotty at the top. And he's getting a little bit of credit for the situation here, too. Nope. Stand corrected. He's exactly at his season long. But so what that means is there's no ding in the model for facing OKC here. It balances him out to exactly in his who he is spot. Isaiah Joe on the other side of that equation. Mix and match piece at best. Brolo as a wild card center. Any given lineup, I think if you just throw one Brolo share into it, is perfectly fine. He's been playing a little bit more minutes-wise. It's a good matchup for him, so I could see him succeeding. But again, another guy who's nowhere near a priority, barely even on the board. LaMelo did not come up again in 30 minutes, so if you're expecting that's the high end of the range, which I am, we're not getting LaMelo today. This is, as I mentioned before, and really Doug brought up initially, if you see Holmes out, Vukovic will shoot up the board. He is already above the value threshold at 3,000 with a 16-minute projection. That will rocket up the board to be your value of the day if that changes. Outside of that, I think I'm going to punch it out, guys. Hour 21 in. Solid show. Super Bowl projections are live on the site. They've been live on the site for a few days. Check those out. Hockey projections for tonight's 5-gamer are up. These projections will be updated all through the evening. Fortunately, Slate locks the last games at 8 o'clock. Nice night for that for us. For like just being able to punch out of having to stay on top of things for a change. Oh, there's a new episode of Severance on, too. Got to go watch that. That's probably what I'm going to do at 8 o'clock. Depends on how good the basketball games are. But with that in mind, you guys, let me go see what's changed out there. I'll be on top of all the news, anything that changes. Hit the like button here. Subscribe to the channel. We need, what is it? You guys can see it. I can't. It's like 130 some odd subscribers. If everybody here tells 2 people, just go into the other Discord and tell 2 people in there. Go subscribe to Terry's channel. You don't ever have to watch it. Just go subscribe. You used to like him. Now you never come around. Tell them. Tell them I exist. Tell them to come subscribe to the channel. It'll help if we get it over 1,000. But with that in mind, guys, good luck out there tonight. Enjoy the Super Bowl on Sunday. Have a great weekend. Somebody go win something. Share it when you do. Send screenshots when you do. I love to see them. Makes me feel good. We'll be back on Monday for more. Adios.